some Illinois Republicans say the Commission on Equity and Inclusion has failed its mission and should be disbanded. Joining us to discuss the latest in his ongoing reporting on the commission is the Center Square investigative reporter Jared Strong. Jared, you had quite the visit to Springfield last week, but you still can't get commission members to answer some simple questions. After last week's commission meeting in the capital city, you approached them with these questions. Let's take a look at that.
That lawmakers are expressed that they were upset with the performance of the commission and perhaps that you're not earning your pay. You guys, were you there for that budget hearing by chance?
Correct.
Okay. What do you make of that?
I have no comment.
Okay. Were you aware that the remote public participation, like the link for WebEx and the dial-in instructions, were missing from this agenda?
Right now, I'm not approved to give any comments right now on this or any topic, so I apologize.
Okay.
But if you would like to speak with our outreach director.
Oh, do you want to talk to me?
The question is, can I? I'm actually getting ready for a hearing, but I appreciate you being here, and thank you so much.
Or maybe you could tell me
I can.
the dial-in instructions and the WebEx link were gone for this meeting's agenda. Was that just an oversight? Because it was missing from missing from the certification subcommittee meeting last week too.
Again, I appreciate you being here. I'll have to respectfully decline to engage, but you have a good afternoon. And
Jared, you were asking just simple questions there. Reaction to what lawmakers are saying, and then, hey, what happened with the public access link to your regular meeting? They're being polite, saying that they can't interact with you. Your thoughts on that?
You saw one of the commissioners say that he wasn't authorized to speak. I mean, he's one of the bosses, so I don't know who's going to authorize him. But they've, the 7 commissioners that lead the Commission on Equity and Inclusion, along with their staff, have roundly refused to respond to any of our, requests for comment in recent months. The only information I can get out of them is through records requests. So, it has to exist as a digital or physical document for me to be able to get anything from them. So this was just kind of more of the same. It was disconcerting that for years, the commission's been around since 2022, and all of their meetings are broadcast online. You can tune in from wherever. And after state lawmakers grilled them earlier this month, it was Illinois senators, after they had a budget hearing and asked a lot of pointed questions, all of a sudden the next 2 meetings were missing that link. And that's how I have been watching it. I occasionally attend in person, but I can't help but feel that was somehow targeted at my participation in some fashion.
You then sat through hours of a late evening budget request hearing in the House, including budget requests from this commission. But when the commission went in front of the House committee, what did you see, especially considering just the week before, you had senators from both parties with some pointed questions? Were commissioners ready to answer these important questions about the outcomes of their work?
They were a bit more prepared. They actually disclosed some information in the hearing that I hadn't heard before. Let me just give some background. So like I said, the commission's been in existence for several years now. Its focus is to increase the amount of state contract money that goes to businesses that are owned by racial minorities, women, and people with disabilities. Our investigation into their work, though, has found that its 7 commissioners are relatively highly paid at $150,000 a year. They have less responsibility than other similar board members in paid positions. They are allowed to work side jobs for pay, which most of them have done. And crucially, they've overseen a computer software switch that they said would make their work more efficient. But instead, it's led to a tremendous drop in the businesses that they certify for government preference, from a peak of about 5,400 to 2,800. And that was the question that they were somewhat able to answer. This problem's been going on for almost 2 years now. And in the hearing, the executive directors said that they were going to have it fixed by the end of June. So there weren't a lot of answers. And quite frankly, the lawmakers had so many questions that they ended up just closing out their portion of the hearing early, and they're going to call them back. And that hasn't been scheduled yet. But, some lawmakers were questioning them based on our reporting. Others had their own concerns, and this was bipartisan criticism too. We had Representative Brad Hallbrook. He's a Republican and a member of the Illinois Freedom Caucus, which you referenced at the top of the segment. They want to disband the commission. He told me after the hearing that he's heartened that Democrats are taking notice of what's going on. And then we had a Democrat, Representative Angelica Guerrero Cuellar, who was miffed that the commission had not acted on her suggestion a year ago to coordinate with the Secretary of State's office to contact businesses that might be eligible for certification. She told me after the hearing that the commission's staff has not adequately explained how they operate, and that she needs more information before considering whether lawmakers should, alter its structure.
It's pretty remarkable. And as you mentioned, the Illinois Freedom Caucus, following your detailed reporting on this over the past several months, did release this statement saying that what the Democrats claim was intended to expand opportunity in state contracting has instead become a multi-million-dollar failure for taxpayers, creating barriers, reducing participation, and adding unnecessary bureaucracy. So what's next for this story? You mentioned that they, are expected to come back in front of a House committee that has yet to be scheduled, but do you think that this is actually going to bring about changes to the commission, to how much they're paid, to some of their policies?
Yeah, it's difficult to say. One Democratic senator, or excuse me, a Republican senator suggested that perhaps they should force these commissioners to work full time so they can't have side jobs. Obviously there are people calling for the complete abandonment of the commission. We'll see. They're requesting $5.6 million for the next fiscal year. That is what these hearings are about. And we're just, I'm guessing the next hearing is going to be next week, but I'm not sure if it'll be that soon. So a lot of it's going to hinge on that hearing probably.
Jared, how pervasive is this in other states? Do other states have these types of commissions to look at how they can parse out taxpayer-funded state contracts to, certain groups or certain companies over other companies?
I wouldn't say it's uncommon. I don't know how many states have them, but some of Illinois' neighbors have similar efforts. They haven't devoted as much money or created this, a commission of 7 people that make that much money to do it. Our reporting has found that these commissioners they take no votes of consequence. It's unclear really what their day-to-day responsibilities are, in part because they won't talk to me. But it seems like the staff does quite a bit of the work. So it is an outlier, but there are states that have goals like Illinois does. Illinois wants to give between 20 and 30% of state contract money to these businesses. I think Wisconsin or Ohio is lower at like 15%. So it's somewhat common, but it changes, and I haven't found another state that has this have devoted this many resources to trying to make something happen.
Millions of dollars, and only to see their numbers decrease. Definitely raising a lot of questions for both Republican and Democrat lawmakers in the state of Illinois. A measure giving Illinois voters the opportunity to consider a millionaire's tax one step closer to the ballot in November. The House Joint Resolution Constitutional Amendment 21, it would raise the tax rate on income more than $1 million from 4.95% to 7.95%. Here's bill sponsor, Chicago Democratic State Representative LaShawn Ford, explaining where that money would ultimately go.
Of the revenue collected, 50% shall be used to provide property tax relief in all communities. 50% shall be distributed to school districts solely on a per pupil basis.
Now, the proposed amendment popped up in front of legislators late Tuesday after majority Democrats waived posting requirements to hear the bills in committee immediately. Republican State Representative Stephen Reich had a series of questions, including how half of the $2.2 billion in more tax money from taxing millionaires would ultimately impact schools.
You're not giving us, or the voters in this case, a clue as to how this is going to have an effect upon their particular school district. And another question is this going to apply to charter schools? Is this going to apply to private schools, or is this only public schools?
Well, we really can't get there until we adopt the amendment, and then we could work on implementation. That's what the constitutional amendment will allow.
Now, Reich also said he thinks this runs afoul with the state's flat tax constitutional provision. There was an attempt to change that back in 2020 to have it higher taxes for higher earners, but voters rejected that proposal. Ford says this measure does not impact that flat tax provision.
It doesn't remove our constitutional requirement for the flat tax rate. We tried the progressive tax, that didn't work. This would just be an implementation of the 3% on income above $1 million. So we still have our constitutional obligation to tax at the flat rate, keeping the personal and business intact.
I have to say that I find that not a very good answer, because you are creating a second tier of income subject to a higher rate of tax.
Well,
that violates the flat tax provision of the Illinois Constitution.
Now, other criticisms of the measure say it's not tied to inflation. So if you put a dollar amount in the Constitution, you may have to revisit it as inflation continues. More people are going to be hitting that threshold and facing higher taxes. And again, it won't be tied to inflation. Also, as you heard, no real plan on how to administer the $2.2 billion estimated that such a surcharge could impact the state's tax base. But also, the business community urged to have the proposed amendment rejected. Mark Denzler is with the Illinois Manufacturers Association, and he shared his opposition to the bill yesterday.
First, the majority of businesses pay taxes under the individual tax rate. 22,000 companies, according to the IRS, had revenue of $1 million or more, meaning they're going to see potentially a 61% increase in their income tax rate. At the same time, if I heard correctly earlier, there's no guarantee that companies will get a property tax break. So they're going to pay higher income taxes with no guarantee that those companies will also be getting a property tax decrease.
Again, because the measure would split that $2.2 billion with 50% going to public schools and 50% would go towards residential property tax relief in a state of Illinois that has the highest property taxes in the country. Democrats say this is a tax on the 1% of earners and is needed for schools and for property tax relief. Others, though, say it's really just going to continue forcing higher earners out of the state of Illinois to find other opportunities elsewhere with cheaper tax rates. But Republican State Representative Martin McLaughlin, he said all of this isn't needed. If the state would just pay local governments what they're owed from taxes that the state already collects.
We don't have to change the Constitution. It's called LGDF. We already collect the money. We owe the villages 10%, and the governor's reduced it to 6.2. Step one, restore it to 10%. It immediately reduces municipal taxes. Step two, rinse and repeat. It's like shampoo, simple, easy, and we should be doing it each and every year. So without changing the Constitution, we already have provisions to do this. $1.2 billion to go back into our communities. So I think we all share in the same desire to lower property taxes. I think this is a measure that's going to hurt businesses. And unfortunately, I've experienced it personally with too many friends who have left the state and are enjoying North Carolina, Texas, and Florida way too much.
Now, the measure is expected to be on the House floor as early as today. Just getting a note from Jim Talamonte, our reporter in Illinois, saying, yes, indeed, it's being brought up on the House floor. Passes there, goes to the Senate, and if approved by the Senate by May 3rd, It would then appear on the ballot for voters this November. Meanwhile, the Illinois House Ethics and Elections Committee Tuesday had lobbyist Ed Sullivan promoting a bill to allow for elected officials or those seeking office to use campaign funds to pay for private security who can carry firearms.
Under the ethics bill last year, obviously, as it was explained, they added the ability for candidates and public officials to use campaign resources to use on security, personal security. One of the things that we're changing here is they did not talk about licensed security. And so what we're doing is adding in the fact that if you're going to have security and spend money, resources, you must use a licensed security agent.
Now, Democratic State Representative Katie Stewart, she wanted to be clear that requirement for certified security wasn't necessary in all instances.
I think it's important, I think everybody understands it, that if you are choosing to pay for security out of your own pocket and not using your campaign funds, this would not apply. This is only if you are using your campaign funds, and I think it makes a lot of sense in either instance to make sure that you find someone who's licensed, but we are not putting that your personal money you can spend however you personally want to spend.
Correct.
Now, this is just a smattering of some of the laws that they're looking to try to implement with the House continuing session today. They're scheduled Thursday. The Senate returns next week. Then it's going to be a mad dash through the end of May to get bills, including the state budget, across the finish line. A few estimates are that they've already approved 500 bills out of either chamber. We'll see just how many bills they approve before the end of legislative session come May 31st. So be sure to get the newsletter in your inbox for free by subscribing at thecentersquare.com. The Chicago Bears say a megaprojects deal that passed the Illinois House yesterday needs additional amendments in order to make Arlington Heights a feasible stadium site. Now, the Bears said in a statement they support Illinois leaders as they determine the path to make essential changes in aligning on infrastructure funding. The House passed a bill Wednesday night late that the sponsor says changes the legislation prohibit data centers using incentives, a tiered duration for tax freezes depending on the dollar amount of the development, and a 7-year sunset on the bill so lawmakers could evaluate how it goes before deciding whether to continue it. Speaker Chris Welch, he said that they got the bill across the line of scrimmage before the clock ran out yesterday.
What began as a conversation about the Chicago Bears resulted in a statewide tool for economic development paired with real property tax relief for working people.
Here's the sponsor of the measure, Chicago Democratic State Representative Cam Buckner.
When you talk about what was in this bill and the stuff that we worked on with the governor's office and the Senate office and the Senate since January, this is the framework that not only I think will remind the Bears that this is their home, but it will remind other developers and organizations across the state and across the country who may want to stay here or come here why this framework makes us competitive.
So again, not specifically about the Bears, but the Bears seeing it as something they could work on with legislators. After the bill passed the House yesterday, it still can be brought up in the Senate where more amendments could be made before going back to the House for concurrence. Again, they have a May 31st deadline to finish everything up with simple majorities. Clearly, a lot of people are going to be watching that end zone timeline. Now, Buckner, he said another tool in the bill is new opportunities for vacation and adventure districts. And that includes at least 500 contiguous acres, producing at least $500 million in capital investment and generating at least $300 million in annual gross sales, and attract at least 1 million annual visitors, create at least 1,500 annual jobs. That's just one of the parameters to be able to get special incentives like tax breaks and such to make those types of developments. Now, once the state certifies a mega project developer, the bill says the developer would then negotiate an incentive agreement with the local taxing body. The developer would then make a payment, with 50% going toward property tax relief. But Americans for Prosperity Illinois Deputy State Director Brian Costin, he expressed to a committee concerns about the constitutionality of picking winners and losers, with some businesses paying different property tax rates than other businesses.
If I was a business owner, I'd be really scared. I'd try to move into the megaproject district. So there's a wide disparity. In the megaproject districts, we do think this is going to create a lot of development. There's going to be some of the lowest property taxes in the nation assessed on properties inside the megaproject district. But outside the megaproject districts, we're going to see some of the highest property taxes in the nation already. And without fixing these portions of the bill, we think that over 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, up to 45 years, that these property tax rates can double or triple. And we're concerned on what that might make those communities look like if that's not rectified.
Now, on the House floor late Wednesday, a measure did get bipartisan support. Republican State Representative Martin McLaughlin, he says they should go ahead and advance this measure.
One thing I do know is my friends on the other side of the aisle and the governor certainly cannot afford for the Bears to leave the state of Illinois, and more time will cause greater expense to the tunes of billions of dollars of incentives. So for that reason, to stop the bleeding on incentives and taxpayers, I urge that we move forward.
Please bring your remarks to a close.
I appreciate it. Thank you. Just one final sentence. So I urge that we move this project forward because, let's face it, guys, it's going to happen, and the longer we wait, I can't watch billions of dollars more in incentives be thrown away. So I'm going to advocate for this at this time.
But other Republicans were skeptical. Republican State Representative Blaine Wilhauer, he criticized the bill and also Democrats for advancing it.
But if you're a homeowner, a farmer, a small business person, you pay the full value. No questions asked. You don't get to go into back rooms and cut deals like this. Now, here's the part that should alarm every taxpayer in Illinois, because this is where the real damage happens. This deal allows local governments to treat projects as fully developed for borrowing and levy purposes. Like all that new value is on the books, while the corporation is only paying taxes based on the pre-development value. Think about that. Government gets to spend and borrow and build their budgets like it's a multi-billion-dollar property. But it's only collecting taxes on a fraction of that.
And while there was bipartisan support for the measure, there was also bipartisan opposition. Chicago Democratic State Representative Lillian Jimenez worried that the measure, it leaves certain communities behind.
I feel that these incentives, while working towards a mega project, really leaves out behind a lot of our communities in the northwest side and west side of Chicago, and many communities. Homelessness was brought up. I do believe that the homelessness situation in our communities needs to be addressed, and I don't see this project as being the solution to that.
Now again, the measure passed the House. The Senate expected to take it up next week, where they could possibly amend the bill and then get it over back to the House for concurrence. That May 31st deadline rapidly approaching. Now, another measure we reported on yesterday here at the Center Square Daily that was expected to come up was a measure impacting how the state draws legislative and congressional maps. According to the House Speaker's bill, the priorities are in order for all districts to have near equal population when they're drawing maps, to provide equal opportunity for all citizens, regardless of race, when they're drawing maps, the creation of districts with racial minority influence, and for district borders to be unbroken and compact. And this is a simple question being asked to voters. But Republicans see it differently. State Representative Ryan Spain, he criticized the proposed amendment. He said they need an independent commission to draw maps so that voters are choosing their elected officials, not politicians picking their voters. And he urged for this proposed constitutional amendment that could appear on the November ballot to be voted down.
This is not democracy in action. This is the embodiment of the corruption of absolute power. It is wrong. In Illinois, if you like the way things are going, if you like paying the highest property taxes in the country, rising cost of living, out of control debt, a state that continues to be plagued again and again by ethics and corruption scandal, then you'll love this Constitution Amendment. But if you don't, if you're tired of seeing your family fleeing the state of Illinois, your children and grandchildren exiting for better opportunities in other places, you need to vote no on this amendment.
Illinois House Speaker Chris Welch, who brought the amendment forward, he said the measures needed to protect voting rights in Illinois.
When I look at that portrait of Abraham Lincoln watching over us from the Republican side of the aisle, I recall his words that a nation of the people, by the people, and for the people shall not perish from this earth. Those words and that vision guided our country through our darkest hours. Let's show everyone today that in the land of Lincoln, we still believe that a democracy of the people, by the people, and for the people must include all of the people.
Now, while they have a May 31st deadline to pass legislation with simple majorities, they have a May 3rd deadline to approve constitutional amendment proposals in order to get it on the November ballot. So that measure making it across the finish line in the House before it goes to the Senate, who returns next week, and they could take that redistricting proposal up. Again, it doesn't change the state's maps now, but it lays out some guidance for how they will remap in the future. But that May 3rd deadline is going to come before the House has an opportunity to take up that proposed Millionaire's tax, something else we reported about yesterday, expecting it to come up, but that did not happen last night. Here is the Speaker saying how he still says there needs to be work done to the bill.
You know, I am a big supporter of taxing the rich. I believe that the rich should pay more to help us do more. For those who much is given, much is required. But I've said a number of times that the title on that door shouldn't be Speaker of the House. The title should be Listener of the House. And part of doing this job right and getting to positive results like we got to today is listening to people. And what we heard from listening to a lot of people over the last few days is that more work needs to be done. And we're committed to doing that work.
The House off the rest of the week. They don't return next week. The Senate does. So if you want to stay up with what's going on at the State House and how you, the taxpayer, are being impacted, be sure to get the headlines in your inbox with the newsletter, free at thecentersquare.com. And also be sure to subscribe right here to the Center Square Daily. It's now up to the Illinois Senate about whether the honey jar for the Bears could be sweeter after the House passed their version of a deal Wednesday. This coming, of course, as additional amendments are necessary, according to the Bears, for their Arlington Heights plans. The Bears putting out a statement saying that they support Illinois leaders as they determine the path forward to make the essential changes to the megaprojects bill and align it with infrastructure funding. Now, this all coming as the Illinois House Wednesday, passing a 300-plus page bill with last-minute amendments splitting Democrats and Republicans with both bipartisan support and bipartisan opposition. And the bill, while it doesn't just impact the Bears looking to possibly set up a mega entertainment complex in Arlington Heights, as long as they can get some tax carve-outs and some incentives and some infrastructure costs covered by the taxpayers, or they could go to Indiana, who passed a bill and the governor signed in Indiana to sweeten and entice the Bears to come to that state. But Governor J.B. Pritzker this morning was asked about the pace of Illinois' deal and what's coming up next.
I can tell you that there is a need to, for speed here. We need to move somewhat expeditiously. I realize the Senate has some work to do, and there will be amendments, no doubt about it. Some of it, I think, for the Bears anyway, didn't make sense. And so, well, again, I don't want to, I think they're working that through with the Senate. I don't want to get involved here in front of all of you. I think there's just aspects of it that I guess I'll give you one example. They had said at the outset that an amusement tax is something that really won't work, and that they really don't want to see happen on top of all the other taxes that are imposed here. So, you know, when I think it's a 9% amusement tax has been put on by the House, obviously that's something that they didn't expect. We're obviously trying to keep the Chicago Bears in the state of Illinois. I also want to remind you that this bill wasn't about the Chicago Bears alone. This bill is really about economic development broadly for the state. It's a mega projects bill because we have a bunch of mega projects that we can attract to Illinois if we have the right structure for folks to deal with property taxes, which, by the way, they do.
Now, the governor does say that people want property tax relief, but Republicans criticizing this bill, saying this isn't about broad property tax relief in the state of Illinois with the highest property taxes. They say it's a carve-out, that the government is picking winners and losers, with regular residences having to pay high property taxes while mega projects like the Chicago Bears will get property tax deals. Americans for Prosperity also criticizing the deal, saying that while it's going to be great and lower the property tax to among the lowest in the country for these specific areas with so-called mega projects, it's not going to do much to help those who are paying the highest property taxes, including small businesses who Americans for Prosperity warn are going to be impacted negatively by this if they're not in those mega project districts. The Center Square also talked with economist J.C. Bradbury, who criticized the deal.
I think that you can't really blame professional sports team owners for asking, because they've learned that politicians will give them whatever they ask for. And I think what it's important to remember from the public perspective is that these teams don't want to leave. And so right in Chicago, Illinois taxpayers faced the same things back in the 1980s when Jerry Reinsdorf threatened to move the Chicago White Sox. Their good buddy happened to be the owner's good friend happened to be the governor of Illinois, and he basically threatened local representatives to fund the stadium. And then afterwards it was over, Jerry Reinsdorf openly admitted that he wasn't planning to move the team. And so even though we have these threats, I think a lot of times they're cheap talk.
Now, the state's economy, clearly an issue in all of this. While the governor touts some lists with Chicago high up for certain types of attraction for corporations, the Tax Foundation regularly puts Illinois among some of the most expensive tax policies in the country for both corporations, small businesses, and individuals. The state of Illinois has got the second highest gas tax when you compare workers' comp costs to neighboring states, another added item for businesses and their increased costs. The governor, he seems to reflect and say, yes, indeed, people are looking at taxes, and in particular property taxes, and everybody wants relief, but he's also looking to balance that with what they can do to attract the Bears to Illinois.
Listen, we all want property tax relief. There's no doubt about that. I think that what we want to make sure is that, you know, if there's property tax relief, that it's meaningful, that it doesn't, you know, penalize the Bears in their desire to stay in the state of Illinois, but that also benefits particularly the surrounding communities, but also perhaps the larger, you know, community of people who own property in the state. Yeah, we're always competing with other states for businesses, and this is just another example of that. And so the Bears have a meeting. The NFL has a meeting next week. It's not going to, you know, completely flip the script, and all of a sudden on that date you're going to see, you know, Indiana is being chosen if Illinois doesn't have a bill. Having said that, if there is not true progress that gets made, if it isn't obvious to people that the Senate is moving in the right direction, I think that will make it challenging. But we're all working together. I think, you know, the Bears want to be in Illinois. I think that's really what their choice would be if we can put a bill forward that makes sense.
Whatever does come together in the Illinois Senate and changes made to the House bill, the economist, J.C. Bradbury, doesn't have much faith in it being a win for taxpayers.
Basically, economists have been studying public stadiums for about 5 decades, and there has not been one instance that I'm aware of in which the stadium has actually paid for itself. It has generated enough revenue to pay back taxpayers for the amount generated. This isn't an investment, it's a subsidy. And the Bears are a private organization. The team is worth, well over $1 billion. And it's just not a legitimate function of government. And I think it's also important to realize the Bears have a relatively new stadium, and that you take Soldier Field, which actually is quite old in its shell, but it was basically rebuilt for the Bears in 2003. And that stadium isn't even paid off. So there's really no reason for the Bears to even demand a new stadium for a place to play. It's not even that old.
Now, the Senate, they return next week. Both the Illinois House and Senate return the following week. And the deadline to pass bills, including this potential bill with simple majorities, set for May 31st. Be sure to stay up to speed with the latest on Illinois and get the newsletter at thecentersquare.com. From my studios in Central Illinois, I'm Greg Bishop, and you can join us back here Monday for more stories impacting you, the taxpayer, from around the country, only with the Center Square Daily.